this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Coming to you from Jacksonville State University. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, many, many moons ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth, one of the jobs I had was working in Piggly Wiggly stocking shelves at 2 o'clock in the morning. Worst job I ever had in my life. I hated unloading those damn trucks. I really did. And then stocking all the shelves. I'm not exacting enough to do it. I think I lasted maybe a year, year and a half. But I had my own box cutter. It was a Stanley knife, though. A Stanley knife, the kind you have to unscrew on the side and then reload a fresh blade and all this. And I carried it in my pocket. CVS is a big company. And I did a little research on this earlier today, just trying to, in the wake of having spoken with Nancy, and I was thinking, and I still have yet to establish the source that CVS obtains these box cutters from, but they open a lot of boxes. I know that. He is an assistant manager of this place. And I don't know if you've been to any drugstore chain lately. They're not exactly populated with employees. So even if you're a manager, you're going to be stocking shelves. You're cutting those little boxes open that have come off of the truck, that are back on the loading dock, and you're distributing them accordingly and then labeling everything. So he would have walked around with this in his pocket. And if you like that one, let me give you another one. He would have been proficient with it. Okay. Now, I've got a box cutter at my home. All right. Matter of fact, I think I've got 3. I think I do. And if you ask me about my level of proficiency, I'd say not too good. The last time I think I used one was to repair a water hose, to cut both sides off. And I almost cut my thumb off because I haven't used one and you can't judge it. So I think that one of the big questions is there an indication of level of skill relative to this? How clean were the cuts? How much pressure was utilized? And what type of trauma? I long for the day when I'm actually going to get my hands on the autopsy report so I can physically read this thing from stem to stern. And that has not occurred for me at this point.
Joe, a full day of the trial was spent on blood and DNA. And during the blood section, there was talk about this blood that was 4 feet up in a tree.
Yeah, and we need to be specific here. So 4 feet up from the ground, and 4 feet up from the ground would be consistent with you or I at our heights having blood on our hand and smearing it on the tree. And that's actually a smear or a transfer. So if your hand is wet with blood, and everybody, all of our friends out there have had some measure of experience with blood, maybe somebody else's, certainly your own. One of the things you want to do is when you look down at your hand, first off, you're shocked if you have blood on it. But secondly, you're going to want to clean it off. And many times, particularly if you're not in a position to clean it off in an effective way, you would wipe it, wipe in an area. I've often wondered that if it wasn't perhaps transferred by one of the girls, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just wondering if some kind of injury had taken place and that blood had transferred one to another and maybe they swiped it on the tree. You never know about that specifically, but it is an interesting point because when you've got multiple blood deposits at a scene and you can identify those, that goes to this idea of movement, right? You begin to think, you've got an individual or individuals that are kind of migrating around in this space and they're either dropping blood or swiping blood, transferring blood. This is not an action event like arterial spatter necessarily, where you've got blood that's spraying onto a surface or something like that, or you've got a gunshot wound that has blasted, blood and brain all over a surface. where you've got that kind of fine histamine deposition. It's not what this is. And this image has been, it's been all over the news for a while now. When we were talking with Nancy Day, I do my researches. I have to keep up with her because it's like trying to lasso the whirlwind with her. So I have things running on my computer all the time where I'm researching notes as she's talking, and this image continued to pop up the entire time. This specific image about this transfer onto this bark surface of this tree.
Now that we established where the bodies were found, there were certain things we learned during the course of the investigation, Joe. We learned about Libby and Abby, their families. We got to know them in the first days because there was no resolution to this quickly. No. As the investigation was going on, we didn't know very much, but what we did have was some digital evidence. We had digital evidence that was from Libby's phone. There was a picture that was taken of Abby on the railroad, on the Mononhigh Bridge, rather, and that photo was posted on Snapchat. We had the picture of a man that was caught on Libby's phone, and heroically, this girl knew something was amiss, and as I don't know what was said, what was done by this creepy guy that they saw on the bridge. They call him, bridge guy. But something happened that caused Libby to turn her cell phone, her video on.
Yeah.
And that's where they released this video in the first week of the girl's death, of the murder of these two girls. They released the video, and it shows bridge guy, and the audio said, "Guys, down the hill." That alone was enough to bring people forward to talk to police and tell them what they saw. 3 different witnesses came forward that were on the bridge that day that saw a bridge guy. One woman came forward 3 weeks later saying she was scared, but she saw a guy matching that description who was covered in mud and blood about 4 o'clock that afternoon. Now, back to a timeline, Joe. We know the girls were dropped off by 1:30. We know that Abby took that picture, or that Libby took the picture of Abby on the bridge around 2:13 and posted it, and then started the video recording where we saw the guy say, or heard the man say, down the hill. There is more to that video. It was actually 43 seconds long.
43 seconds.
Yeah, it wasn't just 8 seconds. It was 43 seconds. They have enhanced it for us to hear a little bit, and you could actually hear Libby. And I only know it was Libby because a local journalist went to Becky Patty during a break and actually asked if she could verify who the voice was, because they weren't identifying it in court as Abby or Libby. They were merely just, and Becky said, yeah, that was Libby. First time she'd heard her voice. They hadn't seen the tape or heard it. Can you imagine what that was like 7 years later?
No, I can't.
It broke my heart.
Like getting hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. And the thing about it, I think the question that she posed in that recording was, it was in response to down the hill. It was like, down here?
Yeah.
I think there was some.
There's no trail.
Yeah, there's no trail.
You want us to go down here?
You want us, this is what you want us to do. We've already talked about the size of this thing. There's an indwelling fear already.
Yeah.
You want us to go down here? And what's your purpose for taking us down here? I'm glad that you referred to her as a hero.
Oh.
Because there's so many people out there nowadays that throw around the term hero. You're my hero, or you're a real hero for doing this. You're not. This is a hero.
Yeah.
This is Audie Murphy stuff right here. I don't see how she had the presence of mind to do what she did, but she felt something at that moment in time that scared her. And, she was probably afraid for her friend as well at this moment in time. She knew something was wrong, and she wasn't just this kind of, what do they say? This kind of retiring little flower. It's like she said, okay, I'm documenting this. She's going to get it. She's going to record it, because you never know what's going to happen. In this case, they had no idea. Who would have thought that this would happen in Delphi, Indiana? It's a flea speck place. Again, not disparaging the place, but it is out of the way, my man. It's a long ways away. And what was it about this individual that caught her eye at that moment in time, out of all the other people around there, that caught her eye, that kind of sowed this feeling of fear, or just made the hair on the back of her neck stand up for some reason. And she did that. And in a weird way, Dave, I think you were talking about how it kind of brought people out of the woodwork, because now you're getting this idea of a script that's coming in, a description rather, not a script, but a description of this individual, maybe very rudimentary and primitive, but a description nonetheless. This recording might be everything in this case. The fact that she took that step might hold all of the answers, and it's certainly a place where the investigation could start, I think.
One of the things that I mentioned about one of the women who came forward, describing the guy with mud and blood on his body. Okay, I don't know whether she is a credible witness or not. They brought her up and put her on the stand. But, she's from that area, and she said she was afraid. And, if you were from the area, and in an area, we live in areas like that. They're fairly small. And in our place we live, we know the people around us. You would be in fear that this could take place in your community, that person has not been caught. What are they going to do if I come forward? Nobody knows who this person is. They might be right here. And so 3 weeks go by before she actually came forward, because the police had set up areas around the park to ask questions, the little ID check thing. And they would, what were you doing? Were you here this day? What did you see? Did you see a car? And that's where she actually gave her first statement, was to this officer. Yeah, I saw a guy, and he was muddy and bloody that day at 4 o'clock. So here we are with these different eyewitness accounts, Joe. And you have taken an opportunity on several occasions to mention our friend Cheryl McCullum and her incredible podcast called Zone 7.
Yep.
They did an episode on Delphi recently and talked about the different descriptions that were given of Bridge Guy. Police identified Bridge Guy because, as I said, the first couple of days after they had the video, they released this very short video clip of Bridge Guy and saying guys down the hill. And the description that was given by the 3 different individuals that said they saw Bridge Guy were all different.
Yeah.
And I thought how interesting it was, because Cheryl pointed this out, and I've been waiting to ask you this, because you've undoubtedly been around every type of investigation there is, Joe. If somebody gives a description of what they see, even though at the time it doesn't seem that important, and if you were to ask me about somebody from the Dixie Mart when I got gas the other day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I remember seeing a guy wearing a blue jacket. I don't remember much else, but if you start asking me, I'm going to give you answers. Yeah, he did have a nose, and he had an ear. I think he had eyes, because I don't know if he had glasses, but I know there was at least one eye. I mean, I'm going to give you the answer you're asking me for. And it's going to be based on my interpretation of what my background is and what I see. And at my age, somebody that is 40 years old is young. When I was 20, somebody that was 40 was old.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it's also going to be impacted by your level of fear as well. Interestingly enough, ending this past week, I finished a series with my intro forensic students at JSU, Jack State, where I was teaching the section intro forensics in forensic psychology. And there was a psychologist, German psychologist back in the late 1800s, where he began to form a theory about memory recall. And he was one of the first, he's considered one of the fathers of forensic psychology. And it all started kind of by accident, because he was wondering how are memories impacted over a period of time by eyewitnesses, because he was seeing there was a failure or an inconsistency in eyewitness testimony. And one of the things that he came up with is that there's this idea of kind of layering that goes on in the brain, and it's almost done in order to protect you. And so things that may have been very fearful for you begin, over a period of time, your remembrances begin to kind of morph a little bit. They change. And it can happen for any number of reasons. maybe other daily experiences. Maybe you get distracted from that memory in particular. You're moving on with your life, or maybe it's just something that scared you to your core. And you're talking about this lady that offered testimony relative to mud blood man on the bridge. You never know how she was impacted in those weeks. People that judge her, don't judge her too harshly now. And I'm saying that in very broad terms here, because you don't know what she was going through internally. And then all of a sudden something sparked her. And I think a lot of this has to do perhaps with the size of the community. And you don't know. I mean, it might be the person that's in the pew next to you at church. It might be the person that's at the grocery store bagging your groceries. Or it could be the pharmacy tech that's filling your prescription.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
You're the local chief of police. You're the county sheriff. You're the leader of the state police. You know that there is something out there that is so evil and something that you can't necessarily morally plumb the depths of because of what you've borne witness to. You want to get it locked down. You want to find this person, this individual that did this. Where do you go? Where do you go? I think that on the surface of it, Dave, you think we've got a very small population to deal with. It's not like we're in, south side of Chicago here. We got millions of people. We've got a limited number of folks here. And I think that, going back to what you had said previously, that I think most people thought they're going to have this tied up pretty quick. They're going to have tied up pretty quick. I'm almost certain of it, that they're going to put this thing to rest. And boy, nothing could have been further from the truth.
They had people that were persons of interest early on, a lot of them. And there are still a couple. I don't know that it's been solved yet. I know we're at trial with Richard Allen. He has been arrested, charged, confessed 61 times. But I'm not convinced he's the only one. And I've got questions for you about that. But I want to back up very quickly because we need to put it to bed so we can move on. Because the part I dreaded the most was what happened to those little girls, what was done to them physically. But there were two different pictures drawn of a suspect, the eyewitnesses. One was in 2017, shortly after the murders. Another one was done in 2019. The pictures are similar, but not close enough. The pictures don't look like the guy they arrested, but the guy they arrested was not arrested in 2017. He was arrested in 2022. And people change. There are people in their early 40s, Joe, that could pass for 30.
Yeah.
And 5 years later, they could pass for 60.
Yep.
There's that gap there in your 40s where there are people that look old at 42. Others look young. I mean, and that's what we're dealing with in Richard Allen. And so I looked at the sketches of this possible bridge guy or the suspect, and I don't put any stock in either one of them. Just because I know, like I told you before, if you were to ask me about somebody who, unless I saw them in the act of doing something, they're not really memorable, I would now be taxing my memory on something I wasn't really paying attention to.
Yeah. And so, these so-called sketches that people do many times, you have some that are very high quality, but it always seems like there's a big letdown at the end. It seems like every single time you'll have somebody who'll say, well, God, this thing that they generated looks nothing like the person. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that over the years. And they're not, this is not sketching is not a scientific, pursuit. It's a lot about art and interpretation and just trying to lend some semblance of a face to an individual that may have been seen from a distance, may have been seen in a flash, may have been seen when the person bearing witness to it was under great duress. You never know, what the genesis for any of these images are. And the fact that you've got these two images that are desperately different. Mm-hmm. One guy looks heavier. He's got this very distinctive kind of pattern to his facial hair. The other guy's got curly hair. Oh, and the other guy's wearing a cap. The other guy looks very much younger than the other one. He's kind of fresh-faced looking compared to the old guy. It looks like an old hound dog, maybe, sagging skin and whatnot. Yeah. So they're completely different. But again, it all depends upon perspective. And listen, the door is open here, I think, for a lot of reasons relative to involvement of everything. And I'm not implicating this guy, but I got to tell you, I had alarm bells that went off some time ago, because they hooked this one guy up, this Keegan Klein guy.
Oh my goodness.
That was involved in child porn and this sort of thing. And then you recalculate with what has occurred with these precious little girls and the condition that their body was found in. And not just, let me rephrase that. It wasn't necessarily just the condition. It was, again, I go back to this idea of posing. There's a strong sexual element here. You're talking about pubescent girls that are, that might hit right into the wheelhouse of somebody, because these people that have these affectations for, these pedophiles that have this affectation for children, they actually many times zero in on specific age groups. That younger ones don't do it for them and older ones don't do it for them. It's a specific age group. And both of these young girls fit into a specific age. You could bracket them together. And so I've thought about that, because I'm thinking, it's like, what would be the purpose of eradicating two young girls in this tiny little community? What could they have ever done to somebody? What would be your motivation for wanting to end their life? Are you saying that, perhaps you just wanted to experience what it was like to kill somebody? And so with a big splash, your first kills are going to be two girls that are not in school that day. This is what you're starting out with. And to me, it's always been shocking on that level that this guy decided to do this on this particular day. And he didn't just kill one child, he killed two children. So it's always, that's an element to this that's always bothered me.
All right. Now, Joe, the girls are best friends, about the same age. One's 13, one's 14, but they, their bodies were found within 5 feet of one another. You said you believe they were posed.
Yep.
The injuries suffered. The initial description was that Libby was nude, that she had multiple markings, slash marks on her throat. There was blood all over her, while Abby was wearing some of Libby's clothes. She didn't have blood all over her body, although you could tell that she had a wound at her neck. There was blood that could be seen through her shirt. There was blood there. And when you look at two girls, same age, best friends, and yet left in such dramatically different conditions, where one has been knifed several times about the throat, the other once.
Yeah.
The other is bloody, the other is not. One is nude, one is clothed, with the other girl's clothes mostly, but still, that's a big difference between their treatment after death.
Yeah, it is. And there's partial covering that's going on here, with these branches that everybody has talked about for so long now. But when there's one troubling point to this, that if we didn't have enough troubling points, I think about Libby. I've often wondered if she was a target in this, because she's the one that's found nude. She's the one that's found nude. Let's understand that. And when she's observed, she is observed in what we refer to as a supine position, which means she's flat on her back, essentially. Her left arm kind of extends diagonally up and to the left arm. The right arm extends downward, kind of diagonally away from the body. Her palm, her hand is slightly rotated where you could still see her palm, with the left arm kind of slightly bent at the elbow, palm exposed. And then if we are to understand what was stated at trial, her legs are slightly spread apart. With Abby, she's clothed, and we have to take into consideration some of Libby's clothing has been transferred onto her body, which is bizarre in and of itself. I've worked cases of redressing bodies over the years. Every single one of them I've ever worked it was a serial killer that had done it, because they have time with the body. They love doing this. Some of them do, because they dehumanize the people to the point where they'll treat them almost like dolls, where that they can manipulate into any fashion they want. But when you see Abby's body, again, she's covered with these kind of randomized branches, that sort of thing. Her left leg is crossed over her right leg. Right knee is bent slightly, and it's kind of rotated out so that if you looked at her, you could clearly see the sole of her right shoe. But again, she's in a supine position, which means on her back. Both these young girls are on their back when they're observed. It's just that Libby's nude. Abby is not. As a matter of fact, Abby, if you look at it from this perspective, she's overly clothed compared to Libby. Now, I'm no forensic psychologist, don't want to be, but I think that you have to ask the question, what, not why, but what would be the purpose of taking one child's clothing off and putting them on the other child? What is there a message here? Because how easy would it be, Dave, just to take Libby's clothing and toss them? By virtue of the fact that you're dressing the other child in the other child's clothing, you're taking time. And for this individual that do this, because it's a sexually motivated event, this is precious time, because time is what you want. It's what you want with these two victims. And that takes a considerable amount of time to do it, particularly when you're there handling these bodies that are, face it, super saturated with blood. You may or may not have any experience with blood. You don't know what it's like to kill somebody, but yet you take the time to manipulate the bodies to the point where you're redressing. There's something a lot deeper and darker going on here. That's why, for me, there's, in the mind's eye at least, there's an element of sexualization that's going on. That's why when this Keegan character came up, the Keegan Kline character, I didn't know if he was associated with it or not, but when I start hearing child pornography, what does that go to? Well, it goes to imagery in the mind's kind of fantastic world. Instead, with whoever perpetrate this, they very well, these are no longer images, a digital image. This is no longer a paper image. This is a human that you have now that fits within the parameters of what you desire in your dark, dark heart here. And now you have time. I harken back to, we've heard a lot about Lisk, Long Island serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what he said on his list, Dave, that long list? Remember what he said? There was one spot that was marked on there that said playtime.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Just this past week, I had this thought, I guess it was back on Monday, I had that thought about playtime with Lisk. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, was this playtime? It's just not contained in the environment. It's outside, in an open area where you're running the risk of being found.
Well, all right, stop right there and let me ask you, Joe, because we know that At 2:13, they're on the bridge because Libby takes a picture, and then we've got the video. So we know they were alive. 2:15 in the afternoon. We know that when Libby's dad shows up to pick them up at 3:30, Libby's not answering her phone, and they're not where they're supposed to be. Within an hour, the park is being searched. So within 2 hours of the time her phone was on, the girls are gone, and the park is being saturated with people screaming her name, Libby, Abby, looking for them all over. The bodies are found less than a half mile from the abandoned bridge, Joe.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
The damage done to the bodies, the playtime, the staging. Okay, let's back up to the injuries. Abby has one slice across her throat, cuts her jugular vein, correct?
Yes. Yeah. With Abby, she's got one injury to her throat. And let's keep in mind, of the two girls, it has been stated plainly by multiple people that Abby was the more passive of the two. She was shy, retiring. She talked to you if you were her buddy, if you were her friend. Other than that, all bets are off. Whereas, we've got videography of Liberty where she's clowning. I mean, she's outgoing.
Mm-hmm.
If I can imagine if she was at a school dance and they started playing a song, she's out on the dance floor. She's going to dance and she's going to celebrate. She's going to dance around. She's an athlete. She plays softball, just on and on. These two, opposites attract, right? Yeah. So you would suspect these two would be paired together, that they would find interest in one another. So when you think about them, and you look at Libby and look at her injuries compared to Abby's, and again, this is one of the reasons I was thinking that was Libby targeted, because her injuries to her neck, and she's also got a pretty robust insult to her shoulder as well, and they were very nonspecific about that in the testimony with the forensic pathologist. She's got these insults to her neck, multiple. They said 4, maybe 5. And one of the problems that you have with when you're using a sharp instrument to cut a throat, and I'll just be very specific about that this is, that their throats were cut, is that sometimes it's hard to make out because you will have injuries that will overlap and they'll cross one another, particularly these linear injuries like this. And you can't tell where one ends and the next one begins. So you'll get this kind of cross communication with them. And sometimes the forensic pathologist will look at it and say, injury 4 may very well be a singular standalone injury, but we have another feature here that could imply that this is a second, more superficial injury that we might call injury 5. And when they give them numbers, I've said this before, but it bears repeating, this does not go to sequence. It has nothing to do with sequence. It's just trying to, if you're testifying in court to injuries, it's so that the doctor on the stand can look and say, okay, referring to my notes or referring to this injury, this is one I've identified as number 1. It doesn't mean that it happened in that sequence, but I'm going to describe number 1 to you now.
All right. Now we've got Libby with multiple slices across her throat. And it was suggested that could happen if she was struggling, trying to get away. We also have blood all over her hands and arms, like she was covering, like you would normally do. You bleed, you immediately try to cover it up to stop the bleeding. Where Abby didn't have those types of things. There's not blood all over Abby's hands, and there is only the one slice mark. Also, whereas Abby, her jugular was cut, but her slice on her neck was not as deep as Libby's. And according to the forensic pathologist, she wouldn't have died right away, and she could have become unconscious fairly quickly. Yeah. But she, it was not a kill shot, a kill strike with the knife or box cutter. And yet, again, how does one person manage 2 girls who are filled with energy? How do you keep them where you can cut one and then the other? They're not cut simultaneously. I mean, they're not cut at the same time. They are cut at different times. And there's no sign that they were restrained, other than there's a mark on each of their chins that could be tape marking.
Yeah, you would think that somebody that was going to perpetrate this would show up prepared with bindings, also with tape in order to muffle any kind of sign, or you can use tape to bind with as well. I've had multiple cases where people have been duct taped, the wrist behind them or in front of them, and their ankles duct taped as well. There's no evidence of that though, because one of the things you're looking for, first off, I'm interested to try to understand how they examine this indication on the chin. Was there residue there? Because all of us, and anybody, this is not rocket science, guys. Don't be afraid of it, okay? When anybody can identify with what tape residue looks like, all you got to do is peel a piece of duct tape off of something that you've had it adhered to for a while, and you'll get that kind of, looks like black rosin that's kind of left behind. All of us we see that on bodies too. It will leave evidence of that. And if you're going to use a cord, there's going to be markings. And particularly if you do this in life, which I don't know why you would do it in death unless it goes to the idea of kind of play acting with the bodies. But there's no evidence they were bound, because you would have not necessarily rope burns, but you could have indications that they had struggled against some kind of binding on their wrist or their ankles or whatever the case might be. They're not seeing that. And this goes to the bigger question, and people have been asking this for a long, long time. I still don't have an answer to it. And here it is. How can one person facilitate the brutal homicide of two young girls? And as you mentioned, Dave, they're young, they're full of energy. I got to tell you, to my way of thinking, Libby may very well have been the first one, because she presented the biggest threat, because she is an athlete. I think that she would fight. What if she did fight? What if, and I don't know this, that it happened, Abby was made to watch. She was made to watch while her friend's throat was cut multiple times, and then maybe she felt hopeless. Maybe she didn't flee. I don't know what had happened. That's where the gun comes in as well. Because I tell you, people keep throwing around the term box cutter. All right. I might be intimidated, by some crazed lunatic with a box cutter, but I can tell you, my intimidation, or level to which I am intimidated, is not going to rise to the same level as it will if somebody presents, with a 6 Sauer 9mm or 40 caliber, and puts that thing in my face, and then they rack that slide, and you hear that metallic sound, which we've heard on every television show since we were born, and what that means. These girls are country girls; they know what it sounds like for a weapon to be fired. I submit to you, they've probably eaten wild game before. They know what the end result is. So when you begin to brandish a weapon, you can make anybody do pretty much damn well anything you want to do. And that's why this thing was ejected out on the ground. He was menacing, Dave. Whoever did this was menacing these kids. And I don't know, I've wondered, did he present with this weapon in a waistband or maybe down in his pocket? He said, okay, down the hill. Okay, guys, down the hill. And he's brandishing this weapon the entire time. Maybe it's something that we can't appreciate on video. You never know. Maybe he gives them the directive immediately, and then once they're down the hill, he takes that weapon out, and he's shaking it at them. They see this. And then, to emphasize the point, when he gets down there, he ejects that round, that unspent round, he ejects it, and then makes the fatal mistake of leaving that there. I think that when they saw it, I heard Nancy refer to that earlier today. She was talking about how it glistened. It glistened. That's why the idea that I think the defense counsel for Allen had stated, well, how do you know that round wasn't something that that had been there previously? Maybe they'd gone out target practicing or something like that. Here's the reason why I know it. You're just coming out of winter. You've got an ejected round that's laying out in the open. Guess what they do? They weather. They corrode. It's not going to glisten like that, not to that point. You're going to see, you can see there is a perceptible difference between these. They'll take on almost a green color to them. They're not going to remain kind of shiny and pristine. So that gives me an indication that this thing was probably freshly deposited.
Now, we know that you mentioned the bullet glistening. It was in between the two girls.
Yep.
It had been chambered. It had been racked. You mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
When investigators were looking when they got the search warrant to search Richard Allen's home, they came up with a number of weapons, and one of them was a Sig Sauer. That this bullet, the prosecution is saying that bullet was chambered in this gun that he owned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they have ways we know that of finding out where bullets went, because they say it's just like a fingerprint when the bullet goes in is that true? And they mention a cartridge. What is the difference between an unspent round, a bullet, and a cartridge, Joe?
Unspent round means that this is live ammo. This thing's never been discharged. So when they do this analogy, they say it's analogous to a fingerprint. Maybe a fired projectile. That is one that has been discharged. It's spun down the chamber. I mean, down the barrel of the weapon. It exits the muzzle, and within the muzzle itself, you have lands and grooves. Lands are the high portions, and it twists. Okay, it looks like a candy cane. Okay, that's the best way to describe it. So if you imagine, if you're looking at a red and white candy cane, okay, the white is going to look like a canyon. The red is going to look like a plateau. So the plateau is the land. The canyon is the groove. And so what happens is, as that projectile is fired and the casing itself is ejected, the spent casing, as that lead core projectile is fired and it travels down the muzzle, it's spinning. It's been captured by the lands and grooves. Therefore, it's spinning. It's almost like if you've ever seen a quarterback throw a wounded duck football and it kind of flips all about and everything has no velocity. Well, if you can get a bullet to spin because it's rifled, this is the rifling of a bullet, it maintains the trajectory of it. It preserves the energy. It makes it go further, and it delivers more power upon impact. It's not like a shotgun. It's a smooth bore. So with those markings on a spent projectile, you could use the analogy about a fingerprint, not with a spent shell casing. So you might be in the 90 percentile relative to a fired projectile, but you're talking 50 to 60 with an ejected live round, because what you're looking at, you don't have the lands and grooves. You're looking for markings on the soft brass outer portion, or it can be aluminum, depending upon who manufactured the round, what type of round it was. You have what are called ejector and extraction marks. And what happens is, this semi-automatic weapon is a Sig Sauer, so it has a slide on top of it. So as this weapon is fired, in order to shell or get rid of, discard that spent casing, it ejects it up and to the right. Okay, then the slide slams forward, pushing a live round back into the chamber. So when this thing ejects, the extractor, which has little teeth on it, grab the base of it. If you think about a bullet has a base. It's kind of like the circle that goes around it. At the bottom, it's got a lip on it. So it grabs it, and it has specific markings that leave behind. It's metal on metal, Dave. It grabs it, and then the ejector is on the side, and it literally punches it out. Again, metal on metal contact. You've got hard metal going up against, if you're going up against brass, and brass is one of the softest metals in the world. So these little indentations are left behind. But there's not a lot else you can really hang your hat on. There might be a breech block, mark on the base of it. I'm not really sure about that, if they were able to find that. And that's where the thing slams into the back where the firing pin is housed. But, this thing is non-tapped. So that means that the firing pin has not driven home through the percussion cap to initiate this. You've just got these markings on the side of this soft brass. There's nothing on the projectile itself. So that, though I think that they're probably accurate when they test ejected this thing, because they got their hands on it and they would have taken it to the firearms lab. I don't know. It could either be the Indiana State Police lab. They would have could have done it there at their ballistics lab. I'm thinking perhaps they sent this to the feds and they would have done it. They could have done it very well at Quantico or maybe even the ATF, dependent upon who's, let's face it, if you're going to the ATF with it, ATF has incredible resources. They're the number one agency, federal agency, when it comes to examination of firearms evidence. So you would want it in the hands of pros, and it's going to take a pro to be able to describe this, because it's going to be a major point of contention, I think.
It's the one piece of direct evidence tying Richard Allen to these crimes. Up until now, we have a blurry video, enhanced audio of somebody who could be somebody, maybe him on the bridge. We do know that this bullet was found between the bodies, and that's it. There's no DNA. There is that we know of right now.
Right now, yeah.
This is it. That unspent bullet, that unfired bullet, is all we have tying Richard Allen directly to the bodies of Libby and Abby.
And that, that's the rub in this case, as they say. Now, again, I will say this plainly. We're in the middle of the trial right now, but I felt compelled to go ahead and lay this down for Body Bags and for all our friends out there. I wanted us to kind of orient ourselves. And I make you this promise. I make it to you, Dave, and I make it to all of our friends out there. As the case continues to develop, we will be back with another episode of Body Bags. And when the case is concluded, again, we will come back with a final assessment of the case, regardless of the outcome, because this is the thing that has been bothering us all for years. It's the thing that we want all of the answers for. But now we've laid the foundation. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.